My guest today is Greg Osuri. Greg is the co-founder and CEO of the Akash Network, an open network that lets users buy and sell computing resources, cloud stuff, basically. We'll learn all about this today. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Hey, Andy. Great to be here.
Great to have you here, Greg. Let's do what we do at the beginning of the show. Could you please introduce yourself? I'd love to hear some of your personal and professional backstory. What have you been doing in the lead up to co-founding the Akash Network?
Yeah, so I'm the CEO for Overclock Labs, the creator of Akash Network. Akash does not have a CEO, being a decentralized network. My background being primarily an open source developer for the last 15 years. Prior to Akash, I founded a company called AngelHack. AngelHack was the first hackathon-based accelerator famous for launching or accelerating Web 2. Several companies came out of AngelHack, the biggest one being Firebase, which eventually got acquired by Google, became Google Cloud Database, launched at AngelHack. At peak, we had about 200,000 developers. That's where I developed a keen interest in solving the deployment problem. The deployment problem was, at a hackathon, you would come, start an app or start a company, maybe launch it, maybe get some users. But the moment you want it to scale, it becomes extremely challenging because the next step from Heroku was Amazon Web Services. And the challenge was the technology demanded you changing a server to deploy your application. So that's when we saw an amazing opportunity to solve using this technology stack called Linux containers. Linux containers got popular, Docker being a very popular package. And I started contributing to this ecosystem, contributed to Kubernetes, Docker, Terraform, a whole lot of technologies you hear today. Now most of these technologies are used by 90% of the current cloud computing infrastructure. I was one of the early contributors. That led me on a journey to find Akash.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Greg. And I suppose then it'd be super useful if you could kind of explain what the vision is for Akash. And there's a number of other, I suppose, decentralized cloud computing services as well. But before we kind of get into maybe the differentials between your offering and those, maybe just make the case for why decentralized cloud platforms are so important. What is the vision and what is the reason that, yeah, as I say, these are very important?
Yeah. So cloud today, I would argue, is the fabric that holds the modern society together. All our data, all our computing power. We rely on the cloud so much for everyday, life that you don't even realize how much you're using. In fact, this podcast right now is being recorded, is being uploaded to the cloud. So, like Kamala Harris says, cloud is this thing that's magical in the skies, but really, cloud is just someone else's computer, right? Sitting somewhere, just a very powerful computer. It turns out there are 3 companies that control these computers, 80% of it, at least. Now, that to me is a little troublesome. Why? Because so much power in the hands of few. We had something like that. It was called feudalism, right? If you have so much power in the hands of few, that few dictate the future of this public utility, right? And that's happening already. So today we see AI being so popular. But if you really look underneath the hood, who powers these AI machines? You need something called GPUs. And how do you get them? You have to go to this cloud provider. And it's nearly impossible for a company to get these GPUs because they're scarce. These cloud providers sell the GPUs to the highest bidder. So they literally dictate today how AI should be trained by, and who should use AI by choosing who they want to give their GPUs. So that's just tip of the iceberg. But if you go back, the costs, right? All of us, you and I, we pay every 50% of what we pay to online services goes to a cloud provider. And these are people that you don't even know, right? And this is an invisible tax on society that you don't set. But we all do pay without realizing we pay. And third is a lot of these cloud providers build such incredible moats that is impossible for newcomers to come and compete. Amazon cloud business alone is worth close to $1 trillion, right? And it's for a new company to come and compete with Amazon. It is, there's no way in hell with that kind of moat they have, right? And they stifle innovation. They kill open source companies. They do a lot of stuff. There's quite a lot of actually investigation now, in an active FCC investigation on the malpractices of these cloud providers, right? Both on Google as well as Amazon. And fourth, by controlling the compute, they set the prices, right? So even though there is enormous amount of compute available around the world, look around your home alone, right? You have computers that's sitting, when you're not using them. There are devices that are just online all the time, but they're not being used. Two, if you look at companies, if your companies today that have data centers don't use them all the time. They only use them 15% of the time because they need peak capacity to address peak workloads because the demand is extremely variable. So while there's a lot of compute available for people to use, these three companies control the price because they have the only means to offer the compute to users. Now, that's something we can change. Now, if you understand, taking this underutilized supply and making that available in a decentralized manner where there's no single company, there's no single human being controlling the price or controlling the access, and doing so in an open manner gives you the most efficient price and make sure that the access is equitable. And that's the world we want. And Akash is one of the players in decentralized compute. There are obviously incredible protocols that are solving individual problems. And Akash is solving the compute problem that goes both into CPUs and GPUs. Obviously, with GPUs, it's gotten very exciting lately with AI taking a center stage. Happy to get into that in a bit. But yes, we are growing pretty rapidly. One of the fastest growing networks, in terms of revenue. One of the few networks that actually makes revenue from non-crypto sources. People that use Akash are normal Web2 developers that don't really have too many options today in the open market.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. So, and I like the way that you describe Akash as kind of like Airbnb for server hosting.
Exactly.
Which is a great way of putting it. So maybe just describe a little bit more about how the Akash network works in terms of being an open marketplace, how people can potentially make their idle computing resources available on that marketplace, and what the other side looks like as well in terms of people looking to utilize that compute.
Yeah, just like Airbnb, right? Look at Airbnb. Airbnb is primarily, at least in the beginning, consisted of people that have underutilized space in their homes. I have an extra bedroom. I don't use it all the time. I'll have an Airbnb guest pay me whatever they can afford. And I'll be charging not as an entity that's seeking profits, but as someone that want to get some money for a space that's not being used. That's what Airbnb model is, right? And the benefit to the tenant, well, you get significantly lower cost staying, an ability to stay. Similarly, in Akash, there are about 8.1 million data centers in the world, and out of which in these data centers, only 85% of the time, they're only used 15% of the time. That means 85% of the time they're not being used. Why? Because in an example like Intuit, which makes TurboTax, during tax season, their compute is used 95% of the time, their capacity or higher, right? Because people pay taxes or file taxes in April. Off tax season, they only use 5% or less amount of time, but they still need compute that they need to serve during tax season. It's a single time, one-time cost, a capital expenditure. So they still need to have the compute in order to serve peak workloads, but most of the time they're not. And companies like Walmart, right? You have peak shopping season, really November to December. I think October to November, December, you have peak usage of their servers. non-shopping season, you have minimal usage. In fact, Amazon itself, Amazon.com, being a retailer, they were noticing similar patterns. They had peak usage during these 3 months, and off peak usage, they had enormous amounts of supply. So what they thought was, to essentially to create a cloud provider from the underutilized supply. So they themselves started as, they're a bookstore, an online bookstore, and transitioned to a cloud provider, not because they started off that way, right? So what Amazon did to themselves is what Akash is doing for the rest of them. So what Akash gives you is it gives you the capability as a data center owner or a cloud provider, in fact, someone with some computer in a data center, an ability to, number one, safely provision your compute power to users, get these users, and provide them an interface for them to be able to use your computational power in a developer-friendly manner, process payments, process security, and all the good stuff that you need to do, all the hard stuff that you need to do to become a cloud provider, but don't necessarily have the software and the know-how to do so. Akash gives you that capability, and in a permissionless manner. That's how it works in a nutshell. So yes, it is dubbed to be the Airbnb of server hosting, just like Airbnb. And the good thing is you have such variety on Akash that you don't normally get on a Amazon. So Amazon is more like Hilton, right? Hilton, you have consistency. No matter what Hilton you go, you get the same type of service, same type of bedding and whatnot. But you go to Airbnb, you get an incredible choice. You can get a single bedroom shack or a 10-bedroom villa by the beach, right? Whatever you want. And Akash gives you that incredible breadth of services that you cannot normally get on a typical Amazon. You can get really high density GPUs that are actually sometimes more expensive than Amazon, or resources that are not used at all to be 10 times cheaper than Amazon, right? Because it's just server sitting somewhere that's not being used by the user, right? So you get this incredible choice, incredible variability. For a user that likes that kind of choice, Akash is great. And now Akash's biggest use case for Akash is machine learning and AI, because there's just a general shortage of chips available. And a lot of them actually bought a lot of chips before, machine learning companies, but these chips are not being used, right? So because it was hard to get chips, so people made large orders. Now there's a enormous underutilization of chips, right? There's a lot of chips everywhere. So Akash now is a marketplace to get access to this underutilized chips.
Talk to us about the pricing then, Greg, because obviously, the whole point of this is that it's going to be significantly cheaper than using one of the big, centralized cloud providers. And on your website, you have a calculator which kind of does some rough comparisons and explains the reverse auction system that you guys work. But look, talk through this, but essentially, it looks like basically, ballpark figures, I guess, 80% cheaper than something like AWS and some scenarios. So maybe just briefly explain the reverse auction pricing structure, Greg.
Yeah, so the way pricing works on Akash is it really begins with the tenant, the person that want to rent compute. The tenant describes their workload in this language we created called SDL, or Stack Definition Language, we call it. And it includes the resources you're requesting and the price you're willing to pay for those resources. And you place an order, a buy order on the blockchain. And providers that can fulfill this order bid on it within the price parameters you set, right? So you then are required to select the provider that you want to pick and go for it. So sometimes you get there's a bidding engine, but there's no matching engine. That's by design, because sometimes you may get resources that are better than what you want, but a little bit more expensive because that's what provider has available, right? So, there's a degree of dimensionality that's very hard to commoditize in compute. That's why you have this, provider essentially telling you or offering you a price that they're willing to offer the services, right? So there's this flexibility both on you on how cheap you can get, as well as providers on how much they're willing to offer. So the prices, if you look at range anywhere from like 80 times cheaper in lots of cases, because a lot of the providers are just giving out the underutilized supply and they can get whatever they want to get. To in some cases like GPU, it's not that cheap. I mean, it's maybe 10% or 20% cheaper, depending on how much inventory there is for a certain type of chip, because GPUs are in higher demand, right? So yes, on an average, I think it's sort of like CPU compute is like at least 50 to 80% cheaper. Yeah, GPU is not that cheap.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you for explaining that. What about, I suppose, market differentiation? I said we would talk about how you differentiate yourself from other decentralized cloud compute providers. There are a number. Just how do you think about your space in the market versus, I guess, both, AWS and then other decentralized blockchain-based platforms?
Yeah, it begins with the user experience, right? So Akash is a very developer-focused tool. So it appeals to developers that want simplicity, with power, not just simplicity, right? Because Akash was designed in 2000, and a lot of these old incumbent platforms were designed in 2006, 2007 timeframe. The experiences are geared towards modern distributed systems. Modern distributed systems based on containers and whatnot. So it's a modern platform that advanced developers love and use. In fact, one of the NVIDIA engineers called that the first experience is usually they're blown away. They're like, well, I haven't seen a platform that can launch in LLM in like 10 minutes, or or a PyTorch in like 10 seconds. Right? It's a very, very good experience, right? Provided you have crypto. If you don't have crypto, it's a nightmare, because getting crypto is not easy. Even with Coinbase, even with all these exchanges and whatnot, right? That's the second part. But yeah, once you have crypto, it's incredible. There are no logins, there are no passwords. So it's beautiful because you're not losing. You have such confidence on like your data not getting lost, because there is no data you're giving to a provider, right? Second of all, it's permissionless, and that's important, especially if you are a platform builder. So we have a lot of platforms like Brev, that's built on Akash. That's the machine learning as a service. Prime Intellect built on Akash. Nodeshift. All these platforms as a service that add their own flavor, different value, but use compute from Akash. So they have two guarantees Akash provides. One guarantee is when they get successful, which they're getting very successful, that Akash is not going to pull the plug. And Amazon is known to do that, right? Amazon is very famously known to look at companies building on top of Amazon. If they identify a decent value or if they get growth, Amazon will try to acquire them or outcompete them. And more often than not, pull their plug, right? So you don't have that fear on Akash, because people could outcompete you that built on Akash, but they do it on a leveled playing field, and not by playing dirty tricks of cutting off access, right? So it's very important when you talk to builders, and you see this happen a lot, right? So non-competitive because not legally binding, but because we cannot compete, right? With the user. And third, the power of the crowd, right? So Akash is open source, and it's incredibly reliable. It's been online for about 4 years, has not gone down a single time, like not a single time. Amazon goes down 200 times a year, right? You see this quite a lot. You saw what happened with CrowdStrike. I mean, CrowdStrike being a cloud service, it did not go down because of a nation-state attack. It went down because somebody pushed bad code, right? So Akash, the chances of bad code happening to production is so minimal. And we had incidents. Nobody's perfect, right? I mean, people write bad code all the time. But because Akash is open source, because you have so many eyeballs watching this code base, 24/7, the chances of bad code getting in, thereby causing instability, is very, very low. A recent experience, there was a security bug on Akash that got somehow managed to bypass all the public reviews we have, made it into the main code branch, right? So, but there was a security company based in South Korea. We never heard of this company. They were monitoring Akash source code. They monitor for every single change that gets into the Akash main branch, and they immediately sent us a report identifying the bug. And a patch was released within a day and fixed before anyone could get impacted. And that is the power of openness and transparency. And you don't get that with centralized platform because you have no visibility into any code that goes up, right? So you get this incredible power of the crowd. And now we have about 500 contributors working on Akash. And a lot of these contributors work for companies like Google and Facebook that are not employable but startup companies, but still do work for Akash because they believe in a decentralized and open future to compute. So that is an incredible, a powerful construct, and I don't think we talk about. And like fifth is like sustainability, right? And open source is challenging because there's no way for these companies to sustain themselves. Look at what happened to Docker. Docker, incredibly valuable tool, they raised money at $1 billion valuation, and they had to shut down or like get sold peanuts to Nutanix, which is an enterprise company, and lose all its developer ethos. Why? Because there is no way to survive as an open source company using the SaaS model, because you have to take shortcuts if you want to survive, right? HashiCorp, for example, started off as an open source company, changed their business license like last year, their open source license, and became a public company and became Open Core. Open Core is literally shutting down all the cool features for your paid customers and leaving the cheap feature for community, which is not real open source. But Akash has an on-chain sustainability mechanism where you have an on-chain fund anyone can apply to, and all the changes happen on-chain and get funded. And you have an army of developers that are developing, all the time because now there's a way to get funded, right? So it is the people that use the network, build the network, and sustain themselves. And that's a very unique model for open source software that Akash was able to bring. So these are the 5 things what Akash brings to the table that your typical centralized provider cannot.
And speaking of on-chain, Greg, there is a native token, of course, which is the AKT token. So maybe you can just briefly explain that. But also, Akash is deployed or built on Cosmos, right? Using the Cosmos SDK. So yeah, just anything you want to say on the token, and also the decision to go with Cosmos.
Yeah, so Akash, the primary purpose for AKT tokens is to secure the Akash blockchain, which is secured using a proof of stake consensus mechanism. In a proof of stake consensus mechanism, each token gets a vote, right? And the majority, the chain with the majority votes is considered to be the honest chain. And since the token holders are not all online all the time to vote, they delegate their voting power to something called validators, which maintain and vote on users' behalf. In exchange for delegation, they get a reward, which is called a staking reward. And the rate currently is about 14% APR, I believe, or anyway, ranges anywhere from 10 to 14%. So that comes to the staking. And the users that are staked into the token, that means they have some stake in the protocol, also govern the system. And that's how the governance happens. That's how the changes happen. Every aspect of Akash is governed in a public setting. If you look at all the way from changing and upgrading the software to having a say on who gets the funds to do work, all that happens on chain. Every aspect, of course, the source code is open source, but even the process to create the source code is open source as well. What that means is the roadmap setting really begins in this self-organized groups called community groups, or which create offshoot groups called working groups, and then you have steering committees and whatnot. All the meetings happen in the public. The minutes of the meeting is published. The actual transcript and the recording is also available for people to come and see. Now with AI, we're able to train systems that will answer questions about what happened in a meeting. In fact, will even tell you what happened with a certain feature, how it got funded, and gives you entire history, makes searchability significantly better because there's so much content that gets created by Akash community members, all the way from development to discussions and whatnot. So all that happens publicly on on GitHubs and on chain for the most part. And the AKT token is a center because there's an economy around this token, right? I mean, people can contribute because they get paid, right? So the value and the economic value of the token is directly proportional to the security of the token. So that's why it's important to have a higher value economically, or else you're going to create insecure chain, which it makes it susceptible to attacks and which destroys the decentralized system, right? So that's why it's important. And in order to ensure there's economic value, there's also a small take income, a portion of the hosting fees that goes back to the stakers of Akash network to create incentive for them to stake and govern the system. So it's a self-sustaining, self-fulfilling system that works in a cyclical manner. And the center of which is the AKT token.
Got it. Thank you, Greg. Makes sense. All right. Well, look, as we start to finish up this part of the podcast, it'd be interesting, Greg, to hear, anything in the product development pipeline, anything like that is coming up. What does the future roadmap look like? And of course, for people that want to learn more about Akash, what is the best place for them to do so? What should they do? Where should they go?
The next big features we have coming up is called trial wallets. Today, a big challenge with Akash is being a decentralized system, it demands a user behavioral change to use the system. So traditional Web2 developers, AI developers that don't interact with crypto are forced to buy crypto. And the worst part about buying crypto is you cannot use your business credit card to buy tokens. So even if you have a Coinbase account, you have to create a business account and do a business bank transfer to spend $10 on hosting your WordPress site, which is not ideal in terms of conversion, right? So we lose a lot of users. In fact, we lose 95% of the users in that very step of getting AKT tokens. And thanks to the United States zero regulation or lack of clarity with regulation, you cannot sell legally the tokens using a credit card on your website. That'll break 50 different. That'll break laws in 50 different states. So we are severely, constrained on what we can do in order to get tokens in front of users. But we have a new feature that'll solve all that problems without sacrificing decentralization. You can see in my excitement because that'll open up 95%, 99% of the users that we were close to before. So I'm really excited about this trial wallet feature. It's coming up very shortly. And the next big feature in the midterm I'm really excited about is really getting to parity with Amazon Web Services. So today, Amazon has compute, which is the foundation, but also has about 500 different services on top of compute that they offer called managed services, right? So when you buy compute, buy cloud services, you usually have someone else manage the database for you because it is painful to manage a database yourself. Even though you may be technically competent, it's just mundane work, right? Or managing a load balancer yourself, or managing a vector database, or managing any of these services that you use as infrastructure. I'd rather pay someone to do that for me. So Akash is introducing managed market service place. Now it transitions from a service that offers compute and related services, which is storage and IP address and whatnot, to a network of networks. And that's really where the network, the network effects unlock, because now we have different people, usually the people that create these open source services, the creators of Postgres or creators of MySQL or creators of Docker, offering their services, managing the services themselves, or associating with companies that they want to offer the services and get a cut, for their creation, right? So we're empowering open source creators with a business model, because open source cloud needs open source software to function. So this is not only going to change the amount of services Akash users can use, but also going to create a new economy for open source developers, which which is very, very exciting for me. And that's in the midterm. We're talking about next 12 months. We're going to be shipping that capability. So these are the most exciting things right now coming up on roadmap for Akash.
And of course, the website is simply akash.network, folks, but a link is, of course, in the show notes. Greg, it is time to start to wrap up the podcast, and we do that by running you through the very famous Crypto Conversation hot take round. Are you up for it?
I'm down. Let's do it.
Let's do it, Greg. I'm just going to run some questions at you. Just want you to give me kind of rapid style, quick form, hot take style answers, if you like. Let's see what you have to say. Question one for you, Greg, is where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
I hate maximalism of any kind because maximalism is biased without reasoning. I definitely on the multi-chain camp. I mean, considering Akash is the first IBC protocol. In fact, Cosmos Hub is the first IBC chain. Akash is the second one.
Yeah.
So I very much believe in islands of chains that are interconnected with each other.
Makes sense. All right. What would you say then, Greg, is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
Decentralized AI is going to be such a reality that people don't really understand the power, what it can represent. And the reason for that is there is a finite limit on what an individual company can do in terms of accessing computational power. When you remove the finite unit, and you can connect the global devices, and right now the challenge is technology, but that is solved and being solved at a rapid pace. Once that's solved, you'll be able to have your fridge contribute to the global machine learning machine. And I think the world hasn't realized the power this represents. And I'm in the forefront of research. There's a company called Noose Research, which is a very popular AI company. They're also users of Akash. They published a paper yesterday, or actually they published the research yesterday that they solved this problem, distributed training. I think we haven't accounted how powerful that's going to be, and that the future of AI is decentralized.
Yep. Well, another way of thinking of that, Greg, of course, is, a quote by Bill Gates, who famously said, we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. So you've kind of just begun to do that, but anything you like here. 10 years time, cloud compute, AI, Web3 all together, what does it look like?
I call it innovation beyond imagination. So what would a world look like? So today Akash is about 60 regions, right? And that's Amazon has about 15 regions. What would a world look like when you have 2,000 regions, 3,000 regions, right? What would a world look where you have agents all self-coordinating with each other on a decentralized cloud where they don't need permission for anybody, and have a decentralized economy, and they use crypto to transact value, right? To self-govern, to self-improve. What kind of productivity gains are we going to get, right? Today, I use AI so much from the time I wake up to the time I sleep, right? This is just, we are in the very, very beginning of what AI can do. And there are markets like programming that's completely disrupted by AI now. Right? I don't write a piece of line of code without using assistance of AI. In fact, I got diagnosed recently. So I was, haven't been to a doctor, and they gave me this diagnosis, and it was bothering me because I couldn't ask all the questions. I uploaded to AI and gave me such an incredible diagnosis that I took to my doctor next day, and he confirmed. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you get today, right? Imagine that 100 times, because now we have access to all the compute in the world, right? Because there are incentives with crypto, and there's connectivity that's solved from these open technologies. But what would a world look like that? I can't even imagine. I think it's going to be so. My cutoff time is like 2 years. I don't know what happens after 2 years.
Yeah. All right. Another way of looking at this, Greg, is a quote by sci-fi author William Gibson, who said that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. With that in mind, Greg, can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people aren't aware of it?
I think AI, I mean, keep going back to AI. Most people have no clue what AI can do, right? Like my mother, if you go to Facebook, I see all these AI generated images and people interacting with them with AI generated images, thinking that they're real, right? But they have no clue what how they are being programmed, right? So I think I have this like dystopian view at the same time, very optimistic view as well. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, because there's going to be quite a lot of damage, and I am kind of anxious on like the worst part because when things get worse, regulation comes in, legislation comes in, but at the same time, decentralization is rapidly evolving, hopefully to a point where we don't need, we won't be stopped by the forces that want to stop us or decelerate, right? So it's already here. It's happening so rapidly. And I'm praying that it happens at a pace where, the people that want to stop us can't keep up.
Yep. Very well said, Greg. All right. It brings us nicely to the final question, which is, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, or TV show?
I love the TV show called Foundation. There's a book, Isaac Asimov.
Yes.
In sci-fi, you'll love that as well. Sorry, you were cutting out. The signal wasn't good. Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, your favorite sci-fi. So you said Foundation.
Foundation, yes.
Yeah, which is based on the Isaac Asimov novels, isn't it?
It is. It is Isaac Asimov novel. That's my favorite sci-fi right now. And book. Book is hard to pick. I don't have one favorite book. It's very hard to pick a favorite book. I have so many favorites.
Yep. You can just go with Foundation as well. That's fine.
Foundation is great. I mean, one book that actually captivated me, and I wouldn't say favorite book, but definitely very engaging, is Sapiens. Is very, very good.
Yeah.
Some reason I think from all the books I read in the past, I think Sapiens was the most engaging one in terms of you could read the whole thing without breaks, right?
Yeah, I agree. I've gone back to Sapiens a number of times. I think I've read it maybe 3 times now, just every 2 years or so, because it's just something about that book. It's a fascinating book, done very well.
Written. That's my favorite read. I wouldn't say call it my favorite book, but I'm starting to read a lot of the old classics now. I'm reading Rights of Man. I'm reading Federalist Papers. All the original American founding books, and there's a lot of alpha in there, especially Federalist Papers. If you're designing governance systems, I think I highly recommend people looking into some of the old books. There's a lot of alpha, I believe, in the books written from 1870 to 1930s. When America was purely capitalistic, right? And I love Murray Rothbard's books. They're a little dry to read. I think as a libertarian, really the Progressive Era is a good book I'm reading right now. How people feel about Rothbard, but Anatomy of State is a short book. I highly recommend people read that to understand really decoupling the state and the and money, right? Everybody should read Atlas Shrugged. I think that's a classic book. And Rand. I can go on and go on.
Yeah. Oh, well, some great selections there. Thank you so much, Greg. And look, thank you for coming and spending some time with us on the show. Just close it out by telling people where they can find you on Twitter, on X, wherever else you like to hang out online, and where people should go to learn all about the Akash network.
I spend way too much time on X, so probably the best place to find me. X, Greg Osuri is my handle. Greg Osuri is my handle on Telegram. If you want to reach out, you can send a message on Telegram or X. Faster on X, though. Akash.network is where you can find things about Akash Network. Twitter is pretty active as well. x.com/akashnet_ is where you find Akash Network.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Greg. All the best, and bye for now.
Thank you so much, Andy.